Good to have you back here with us on New Day. The NFL, another black eye to deal with this morning. Arizona Cardinals running back Jonathan Dwyer has been arrested now on domestic violence charges. He's been deactivated by his team. His alleged victims, a 27-year-old woman and an 18-month-old child. Dwyer joins three other big stars who've been banned from the playing field for off-the-field violence. Here this morning to discuss the widening crisis in the NFL and what can be done. Keith Reed, the former senior editor for ESPN Magazine and a sports business analyst, and George Martin, former defensive end with the New York Giants and former president of the NFL Players Association. And, you know, I love seeing you guys, but gosh, you're here regularly. And gosh, Houston, we have a problem. We've got another story here, Keith, that we're dealing with. Is the NFL waking up in a panic this morning? Please tell me they are.
Oh, absolutely. They've been waking up in a panic for about the last week and a half now. To have these kinds of allegations come out, not only just about, first of all, let's express concern for the child and for the woman who are alleged to have been abused in this incident. But when you go a little bit further now, you look at what happened yesterday. This just capped off a terrible day when you saw sponsors come out. We were here a couple of days ago just talking about how difficult it would be for Roger Goodell and for the NFL to come back from this if sponsors started to be vocal. That happened yesterday.
They're being vocal. They're not pulling out. They're being vocal, though, which seems like a precursor to potentially making some decisions about their bottom line.
Well, they're sending messages to the team. Anheuser-Busch, their sponsorship is worth more than $1 billion with a B dollars. That's a very difficult relationship to unravel, but when you're paying that much money, you're going to come out and you're going to make it clear we need to see some changes.
And that's an overarching thing that we have to consider. We're talking about a big business here. Keep that in mind as we talk about all of this. Here's what I want to ask you, George. Is this one of those situations of when it rains, it pours, or is it that people are feeling more emboldened to come forward? Because we know that this case dates back a few months. The woman came forward now, maybe emboldened because finally the NFL bigwigs are taking this seriously?
Yeah, I think it's more the former than the latter. I think when you look at it, this is the NFL's version of the Ebola virus. It seems to be spreading.
It's an outbreak.
And so forth, there's no cure in sight. And I think there's a big concern. And like you just mentioned, now that the sponsors are standing up in arms and beginning to voice their displeasure, I think that not only is Roger Goodell in a panic, I think that there are 32 owners who are sitting there on the sidelines saying, what are we going to do about this?
Well, then when you use that word panic, then you're making fear-based decisions. And if you look at how the handling of all of this is going, not clear-cut, not consistent, it's a really muddied response.
Absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, I would use a little bit of a different analogy than the Ebola virus. I think this is more akin to the church sexual abuse scandal that you saw some years ago, where it started out very small, you had some allegations, then more and more, and there was a deluge. All of a sudden, they were just everywhere, and we found out how big this is. And the church, the Catholic Church, did not handle it very well in the very beginning. It took a long time. Yeah. And when you see scandals like these in large, entrenched organizations that are very powerful, often it's the hubris that makes it hard for them to deal with the scandal.
It's so interesting. We saw yesterday the Vikings owner, one of the owners, Ziggy Wilf, spoke out and said, look, we made a mistake by reinstating Peterson. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that word mistake because it's being thrown around a lot. But the fact is, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening here.
It's a reoccurring issue. You heard Roger Goodell come out initially and say the same thing, I made a mistake. But now the theme word now is, now we've got it right. So it seems as if they're going to have a misstep initially, and then they'll go back and backtrack and try to correct the wrongs that they made.
But here's the question. So you're dealing with the symptoms, but you're not dealing with the illness as a whole, if we're going to go back to the Ebola comparison. We're putting some Band-Aids on some situations, and you saw very pointedly that sheriff went in and took him off the practice squad yesterday. We're talking about Dwyer. Very public, thing happening. But there's a greater issue about
You're right. And what I worry about with this is this. The NFL has now become a proxy for abuse, child abuse, for domestic violence. This is a societal problem, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be dealt with the NFL. It absolutely should be dealt with in the NFL, but we've got to have a bigger, broader, more honest conversation about domestic violence and where it happens, and it's not just in NFL teams, it's not just in professional sports, it's everywhere.
Will we, or will this just go away, as headlines have a tendency to do?
I don't think this will dissipate. This has to be addressed. The larger issue here is, what are we going to do on a proactive basis as opposed to a reactive basis, because reactive so far is not getting it done. It's not addressing it.
I love seeing you guys. I really like having you here. But every time you're here, we're talking about this, and we're talking about another case. Keith George, thank you. Pleasure to have you. And also, we should mention that next hour we're going to speak exclusively with Adrian Peterson's close friend, former coach. Want to know what he knows of this young man that's in the midst of this scandal that's brewing right now. We are certainly following a whole lot of news this morning. Let's get to it.